Okay, this is a New York Times article that basically tries to address the budget cuts proposed to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's operations and satellites and so on in the US. And it does that in the context of a private company in California called Windborne, which is launching its own balloons, and it gets some funding from NOAA, uses satellite data from NOAA, and is trying to do better, faster, more accurate predictions. Basically, the current US administration is trying to propose that weather forecasting business can be completely outsourced to the private sector, but the scientists and many supporters of the operations of NOAA argue that the government has to fund the infrastructure, let's say in terms of the observational networks with satellites, ships, ocean buoys, balloons, radars, and in some cases flying aircraft missions into hurricanes and so on, because this improvement in weather forecast that has happened over the decades is entirely dependent on all the investments by the governments in the infrastructure for modeling, not just observations, but for modeling and dynamical modeling. And the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecast, ECMWF, which is generally doing better forecasts than most people, also has started AI-based forecasting system, which is what this article is all about. I won't read the whole thing, but I'll just show the main figures. Well, they are just kind of props, but we will discuss the main points. The future of weather prediction is here, maybe. Thanks to AI, companies like Windborne hope to usher in a golden age of forecasting, but they rely in part on government data, and the agency that provides it is in turmoil. As I said, I see the government labs like NOAA and NASA providing the infrastructure like bridges, roads, and airports, and private entities like Windborne and even Google and Microsoft now have their own AI weather forecast models and claim to do better, but there are, debates about whether the baselines used to claim better forecasts are properly defined and so on. Nonetheless, all the private players actually are still very much dependent on the government infrastructure and data to do what they are doing. And this is a good example where Windborne, started by a bunch of kids at Stanford University in California, is also getting funded by NOAA and is growing and wants to do not just data gathering and selling data, but actually producing its own forecasts, and it needs money and it's raising funds. And NOAA is buying its data as well, where there are more and more gaps being created because of turning off satellites and so on. So how this will evolve will depend on how the budget process gets completed with the Congress, which approves the final budget before the president again signs it. And the person who is leading NOAA right now, Neil Jacob, apparently has good support from both parties, both sides of the aisle, and hopefully he can manage to keep the key operations going, key observations continuing, and so on. So just jumping ahead, Windborne is a startup in Palo Alto. Its chief executive is John Dean, who's quoted widely here, and they are basically building balloons here, part of the balloon making assembly line at Windborne in Palo Alto, and we'll see a global map in a minute to see how many balloons they are launching. And here is a circuitry for a satellite antenna at Windborne. So they fly balloons, they beam the data to the satellite, and then receiving stations at NOAA and their own labs can then take it and use AI or merge it with dynamic models and so on, which are fairly standard operations. Typically, the dynamic models are better in the sense they are based on core dynamic physics, thermodynamics of the climate system, weather system. So since the system is very nonlinear and we are perturbing it heavily with increasing greenhouse gases, urbanization, deforestation, etc., the system produces so-called emergent behavior. And if you just do pure AI with data, no matter how good the data is, you will be sometimes handicapped because it may not have seen emergent behavior in the data, or there are mountains which create very unique problems that just cannot be handled with AI as of now, and so on. So there are many details. So people also do so-called hybrid models, which ECMWF is doing, where you have a dynamic model and you have a AI model, and they can work together. And then there are other issues with AI models, like they are black boxes, so you don't always know what they did. That becomes necessary sometimes. Plus, AI can be directly used for so-called downscaling, where global dynamic models are giving you forecasts at tens of kilometers, let's say, and you want some of the information at very local scale, like where the Texas flood caused many deaths at a camping site. Even though there was heavy rain forecasts, it was not specific enough, not hyper local, so AI is helping there as well. Okay, so there is lots of good news, a lot of challenges, and people are moving forward. If the goal of this administration is to push more and more of the weather business, climate business into the private sector, then public-private symbiosis can help, and hopefully it will be an effort that will succeed in convincing the administration that NOAA can exist and work with the private sector to keep building and maintaining the infrastructure on which the private sector runs and produces services for the people that need it, for, firms, individuals, governments, and so on. So some entrepreneurs and meteorologists say this binary view of public and private threatens to upset the mutually beneficial symbiosis between them and the government, which has been going on for a long time. I would love to see a version of NOAA where there are more public-private partnerships, Mr. Dean said, of Windborne, and then those benefits, some of them public good and some of them are commercialized, which means some are given free to people. Not everybody can pay for a weather forecast, right? It's like taking a train. You're paying for a ticket, but an infrastructure is built at taxpayer cost, and not everybody rides the train, but everybody can pay for the train in some ways, because the ticket doesn't cover all the costs of running and maintaining trains. So weather forecasts can be similar, that there are public goods which are provided to everybody, but there are also some parts businesses can buy the weather forecasts designed for them, like airlines, ski centers, various other industries that you can think of that depend on weather forecasts. So this is a map of live balloon flights. Windborne currently launches 300 weather balloons a month, and they're extending the lifetime in terms of how long they can stay, up to 12 days. They will increase the number, of course, and you can see big holes: South America, parts of Africa, India, China largely missing, Australia and Southeast Asia missing. So they want to cover all the regions, big parts of Russia, Siberia, etc., and make better forecasts and at higher resolution than global dynamical models. But you have to always remember that Windborne will depend on government resources, and it will always need guidance from dynamic models as well. Okay, this is the data coming in from the balloons. The National Weather Service buys Windborne's sensor readings, so that's a very nice example of the public-private collaboration or enterprise. As meteorology evolved, the governments were often best positioned to assemble local data into a national and then global picture, with an emphasis on coordination and public safety. Now the National Weather Service's key job is maintaining and operating physics-based models of the atmosphere, software that describes the weather in weather in precise mathematical detail to generate forecasts. There is no need that National Weather Service will only do physics-based models. As I said, European Center is moving towards hybrid models, combining them, and US likely to do that as well, if not on its own, then in partnership with private sector like Winborn or Google, Microsoft, etc. So falling computer chip costs and cloud computing make it companies to be less reliant on the government, which used to own all the hyper supercomputing facilities and the workforce to go with it, but the expense of operating physics-based models on powerful supercomputers means government agencies still do most of the weather prediction. So this is just arguing for how to think about it under the pressure that the agency is facing from the government proposed budget. So Stanford, which was John Dean, the chief executive of Winborn, who started the company with 4 other members of a Stanford Space Club. So that project went big now. So this is giving weather balloon a pre-launch, preparing the sensors, and then there is a picture of the balloon being launched. So I won't read all the details. As you can see, I'm skipping, but there is nice stories about how the company has started with 70-80 hour stay time in the residence time in the atmosphere, but now they ran the balloon for 57 days. Obviously, the longer they stay, the more economic they are, right? And more data continuity there is, okay? So they have 300 balloons a month at 10 sites around the world, flying them on average for 12 days with about 100 balloons aloft at any given time. So for doing AI or merging the data with the NOAA dynamical models or physics-based models, you need data continuity. There is something called data assimilation, which happens before the weather forecast is made. So models are initialized with data assimilation. All the data goes in there. More the data, the better. Quality control, etc. End up creating a lot of challenges as well, but lots of progress happens there as well. The big hole in the plan, Mr. Dean said, was how do you actually go do global weather forecasting. So right now they are in a data selling model, but they have a physicist who built the AI weather I think one of the first AI weather forecasting models during COVID, sitting at home on a sabbatical. So he's part of the company. I think it's Mr. Creyos Costa. No, one of them. Anyway, so it doesn't matter. They have a team that is doing building of the instruments, the balloons, launching, collecting data, selling data, doing AI, doing forecasts, etc. There are limits of deep learning, as I mentioned. For all the excitement about these new techniques, Microsoft and Google also have AI weather models, for example, as well as the Air Force. AI can still have its limitations, and Matthew Chantry, a mathematician who leads the operational AI weather forecasting project at ECMWF, said the field of meteorology was still figuring out what the relationship between physics-based and AI models would be, and then the hybrid models are going to optimize that relations. So obviously physics-based models will not be redundant anytime soon. So Dr. Kiesler, the influential weather model creator, said Winborn is one of a few companies trying to do both data acquisition and also do the modeling. He added they also seem to be quite good at both. So here is a canisters of helium at Winborn, and here is Jehan Godrey's launch operations coordinator attaching a balloon on a launch mechanism. So all the technical details there. So there are some details on how Trump administration is cutting funds and imposing limits on weather forecasting, but NOAA continues to perform its duties. NOAA will no longer distribute data from a U.S. military weather satellite program that is seen as vital to hurricane tracking, but that data is and there is also extreme rainfall data, and it's being promised to be restored by Mr. Trump's nominee to lead NOAA, Neil Jacobs, as I mentioned before, has good support and may restore most of the proposed cuts by the time the final budget is out. So up and about to be sent away. The balloon is ready to go. Looks rather modest, but collects very valuable data: temperature, humidity, winds, typically, and sometimes rainfall, radiation, clouds. Depends on the instrumentation. Okay. NOAA says we'll continue to fulfill our core mission of providing life-saving forecasts, warnings, and decision support. That's from a NOAA spokesperson. But the fast change is happening in the U.S. weather research put Windborne in a complicated spot. The company needs NOAA's data, wants its business, and hopes to do a better job of forecasting weather than the government currently can, but the team of balloon flying AI training techies are regular people too. I have my personal philosophies that are not aligned with the government, like what's best for our private weather company, Mr. Dean told me. You don't want to live in this capitalist nightmare of like pay $10 for today's weather. That's going too far. It has to be a public good at many levels, especially for disaster management agencies like FEMA, which is itself facing lots of issues. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. So we'll see how things evolve, but one thing is for sure, that private companies are here to stay and they are going to keep collecting data. Just to mention, India also has now private companies offering services. India also has government agencies that develop models, run models, issue forecasts, work with the disaster management agencies, and launch satellites, maintain weather balloons, buoys in the oceans, and so on and so forth. So public-private partnership hopefully will be the winning formula in the end, with more and more private sector players playing a role on value addition to offer services to farmers, water, transportation, health, energy, infrastructure, buildings, financial services, and so on and so forth. Okay, let's leave it here.